This is Dave, and today's big hairy idea is one integrated whole. This week, Jews all over the world were reading the story of Abraham, and it's kind of a bizarre beginning of a story. We met him very briefly at the end of last week. We were just basically told that he was born. We didn't really know much about him. It was mostly a story talking about his lineage. But this week, after really not getting to know what's special about this guy at all, we see that it just starts with God speaks to him and says, go, leave your homeland, leave your father's house, leave everything you've grown up with and known, and go to a place I'm going to show you. And we're stuck with the question of why this guy? Why now? Why is God speaking to him out of everyone in the world? And in Judaism, we've got two Torahs, actually. We've got the written Torah that has the literal story written on it, and that's very similar to what Christians refer to as the Old Testament. It's more or less the same story with some differences of translation, but they basically took that story and using that in their Bible as well. But then there's another Torah that we have, which is the oral tradition, which comes to elucidate and kind of fill in some of these gaps. And the oral tradition has a whole field day on this section because there's nothing but gap. There's like God saying to this guy, he picked this guy from everyone out in the entire world and said, you're the guy, I'm going to make a great nation out of you, leave your father's land, and go on this journey that I'm telling you to go on. And so the oral tradition is like, whoa, what's going on here? Why this guy? Why now? And it comes to point out that at as early as age 3, according to that story, that Abraham started looking at the world and recognizing that everything was really part of one organic whole. Now, this was very different from the world that he was raised in, where the world of idols. His father was an idol salesman, and they'd have, a wind god and a storm god and a sea god and a volcano god, whatever it happened to be. There were all these different gods that people used to worship, as if everything was a distinct, independent power. But Abraham looked in the world and said, no, it all works together too well. It's all clearly part of one integrated system. Therefore, it must have been created by one God, by one force, by one will. It's all one thing. We can't subdivide it into different sections. And that was so much of what caused him to be distinct, to break away from the religions that he was raised in. And there's all kinds of other stories about him getting into trouble, and you can go look them up, and getting thrown into a furnace and destroying his father's idols, and having to debate with Nimrod, the head of this city. But all of this is just, like I said, story after story after story about this guy before the Torah ever really speaks to him, before we really ever get to know him. This is all what is causing God to say, this guy sees the world differently. This guy has an understanding of me and the world that I put him in that is so different from everybody else. This guy's special. I want to do something special with this guy. I'm going to make great nations come from this guy. And in fact, if you look back now, there's got to be at least 2 to 3 million people on this planet who belong to a religion, who trace their roots back to Abraham. So this blessing that, so come true, like his way of looking at the world has permeated really the entire world. And it's amazing, and it all started from these words lech lecha. As the Torah begins, when God first speaks to Abraham, it says lech lecha, which is telling him to go. Okay, leave your father's house, leave your homeland, leave this people that you know. But lech lecha also literally means go to yourself. It's like, I want you to go on a journey to becoming more of who you are. Right now you're in a place that's, I certainly found this. I grew up in a different country than I live in now, in a different set of circumstances where people live very differently than people do in the community that I live in. And, it's every year when I go back, I regress a little bit. I go back to being a little bit the kid that I was when I grew up. Because you know what? When you're in your parents' house and there's certain ways that you're so used to, everything feels so at home, and the way people are living is just, it's so natural because you spend so much time there. But for me, to really make big shifts in my life, I had to pick up and move over here to Israel, where I was able to have an entirely different life, an entirely different set of circumstances, an entirely different community, an entirely different set of community values and practices, And it allowed me to become more of who I was. It allowed me to go deeper on the journey that I'd already started back in when I was living at home. But separating myself allowed me to go deeper. And so Abraham is told, okay, it's time for you to separate yourself, to go, not to become somebody new, but to actually become more of who you already are. Go on a journey of discovery, of becoming you, becoming more you than you are now. You've taken great steps, Abraham, but really the city you're in, the house you're in, everything, it's going to hold you back a little bit. You need to separate yourself. You need to go really figure out what your greatness can be. And I want to leave you with that thought about, what is your personal greatness? And what circumstances do you need to create to allow you to really live that greatness? Do you perhaps have a journey of discovery ahead of you as well?